There are places deep underground where light doesn't reach, tight spaces, silent tunnels, and walls that feel like they're closing in. This is the world of caves, beautiful but brutally unforgiving. Today, you'll hear 3 true stories of experienced people who stepped into that world and faced something they didn't expect: a quiet dive that went too far, a training session that turned deadly. But that was only the beginning, because what happened next, in Brazil and Mexico, was even worse. These aren't just accidents, these are moments when the earth itself becomes a cage and no amount of training can save you. Let's begin. Beneath the rolling hills of Bavaria, Germany, lies a hidden world of rock, water, and darkness. The Mühlbachquellhöhle Cave system is a place few have ventured into, and even fewer have returned from unscathed. The cave, often referred to as an underwater labyrinth, is known for its maze-like passages and cold, disturbing waters. It's not a place for amateurs or casual explorers. The dangers are very real, and many seasoned caver consider it a challenge that only the most experienced should tackle. On a cold February day in 2021, a team of divers, all highly skilled and experienced, descended into Mühlbachquellhöhle with a clear mission: to gather data and install a crucial piece of equipment. The group, led by a 57-year-old diver, had been planning the expedition for months. Their goal was straightforward yet vital. They needed to install a data logger inside the cave to help researchers monitor the unique conditions of the underwater passages. It was a task that required precise skill and careful planning, but they had done similar dives many times before. The 57-year-old diver was not only a team leader but also a veteran in the caving world. He had spent decades exploring caves around the globe, from the humid caverns of Southeast Asia to the freezing waters of the Alps. He had the knowledge, the training, and the experience to tackle one of the most treacherous dives in the cave. To the rest of the team, he was not just a colleague but a mentor. His calm and methodical approach to caving was legendary. They trusted him completely. The team's preparation for the dive was thorough. They double-checked their equipment, reviewed safety protocols, and made sure everyone was on the same page. This was no simple cave. Mühlbachquellhöhle was known for its narrow tunnels, which could easily trap or disorient even the most experienced diver. The water was cold, just above freezing, and the visibility was poor. The divers had to rely on their skills and their instincts. Each diver was paired with a buddy, and they kept in constant contact via their underwater radios. If something went wrong, they knew they could rely on each other. The focus of the dive was the Maulwurf Siphon, a narrow underwater tunnel that was considered one of the most challenging parts of the cave. At only 35 centimeters wide in some places, the siphon was barely large enough to squeeze through. Even with the tightest equipment, there was little room for error. The team knew that the diver who went in would have to move slowly, carefully, and methodically. The plan was simple. The 57-year-old diver would swim through the siphon, reach a deeper part of the cave, install the data logger, and then return. It was a straightforward task that the team had done many times before, but the risks were always present. As the diver prepared for his dive, the rest of the team watched him with a mix of confidence and nervous anticipation. They knew how skilled he was, but there was always an edge of tension when dealing with such dangerous conditions. One by one, the divers made their way to the mouth of the siphon. The diver took the lead, entering the dark water. He was familiar with this cave. He had explored it before, though not to the depths they were now aiming for. As he disappeared into the cold water, the rest of the team remained on edge but hopeful. The water was clear, but the deeper the diver went, the darker it became. The Maulwurf Siphon was not just tight. It was a winding maze that forced the diver to move with precision. Every movement had to be measured. Any mistake could lead to entrapment, or worse, disorientation. As he swam further into the siphon, his lights flickered off the wet walls of the tunnel, casting eerie shadows against the rock. Time seemed to slow down, and though the team could hear the faint sound of their buddy system radios, there was no sign of the diver coming back up to the surface. Minutes passed, then 20 minutes. The rest of the team exchanged worried glances. He should have been back by now. The diver had been experienced, but the longer he stayed under, the more the unease began to set in. The cold, dark water of the cave had swallowed him whole, and the team on the surface began to feel that sense of helplessness that every caver dreads. It wasn't panic yet, but it was close. They waited for more signs of life, but the surface remained still. There were no bubbles rising, no noise except for the occasional drip of water from the ceiling above them. Finally, after almost 30 minutes, one of the team members decided to take action. His buddy was missing. He couldn't just sit and wait. The diver, equipped with his own safety gear, entered the Maulwurf siphon, following the path his teammate had taken. The water was freezing, and every movement through the narrow passage felt like a struggle. Each stroke of his fins was measured to avoid getting stuck. He followed the same path, hoping to find his friend just around the next bend. But the further he swam, the more he realized something wasn't right. The tunnel stretched out in front of him like an endless snake, twisting and turning in a way that made it easy to become lost. He passed by a few narrow openings, glancing into the dark water, but there was no sign of the diver. The minutes felt like hours as the anxiety grew inside him. The echo of his own breathing seemed to grow louder in the silence of the cave. When he reached the farthest point he could go, he turned and swam back to the surface, his heart pounding. He surfaced to find the team already in motion. The tension was now palpable. The dive had turned into an emergency. They immediately contacted the cave rescue teams, knowing that it was no longer just a missing diver but a full-on search and rescue operation. The moment a person becomes lost in the cave, the situation turns deadly. Rescue teams from around Bavaria mobilized quickly. They brought in divers, mountaineers, and specialized cave rescue teams. More than 200 people from different rescue organizations arrived on the scene, and the search began in earnest. With each minute that passed, the chances of finding the diver alive diminished, but the team wasn't giving up. They had to try. The cave had swallowed him once, but they refused to let it take him forever. The search lasted for hours, with teams scouring every inch of the cave system, from the narrowest passages to the largest chambers. It was grueling work, as the cold water sapped their strength. Every diver knew that time was running out, but they had no choice but to continue. They checked each passage, each twist and turn, their lights cutting through the darkness in search of any sign of their teammate. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, they found him. But it was too late. The diver was unresponsive, caught in a small pocket of air at the end of a narrow tunnel. His body was cold, and the cave had claimed him. The rescue team immediately tried to resuscitate him, but despite their best efforts, it was clear that the cold, dark waters of Mühlbachquellhöhle had taken him. He was gone. The rescue operation continued as the team worked to recover his body, but the somber reality of the situation hung heavy in the air. The cave that had once been a place of exploration had turned into a tomb, and the diver, once so full of life and energy, had become yet another tragic reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface. But that wasn't the only time a cave trapped people deep below the surface. In another part of the world, a group of rescuers became the ones who needed saving. In the heart of Brazil's rugged landscape, just outside Altonopolis, a natural cave system lay beneath the dense forest, quietly waiting for those brave enough to explore its depths. Bocas Cave, with its labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, had long been a site of interest for cavers and adventurers, but on one fateful October morning in 2021, it would become the site of an unimaginable tragedy. The cave, part of a remote and quiet region, had been chosen for a routine training exercise. A team of 26 firefighters, all experienced and well-versed in dealing with dangerous rescues, arrived early that morning. The air was cool and the sky was still dark with the remnants of the night. The ground was damp from a recent rain, and the cave loomed ahead like a silent, watching beast. The firefighters, accustomed to working in hazardous environments, were prepared for the exercise. They had done similar training hundreds of times before. The plan was simple: practice their rescue skills inside the cave, learning to navigate its passages, deal with narrow spaces, and work as a team in confined, potentially dangerous areas. The group split into two teams. Some stayed outside, conducting surface operations and maintaining communication. The others, led by an experienced fire chief, entered the cave. Inside, the firefighters set up their gear, adjusting their headlamps and testing their radios as they moved deeper into the cave's narrow corridors. The sound of dripping water echoed softly, and the rocky ceiling hung low above them. The cave was eerily quiet, save for the soft footsteps and murmurs of the team preparing for their drill. But the cave, with its dark corners and damp rock, had other plans. It had been standing there for millennia, waiting patiently for a moment of weakness. And in that early morning hour, that moment came. Without warning, the ceiling of the cave, weakened by months of heavy rainfall, collapsed. The sound was deafening, a low rumble followed by the sharp crack of rocks breaking apart. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the ceiling, once a stable canopy above them, crumbled down in a massive cascade of stone. The team, caught off guard, scrambled for cover, but the falling debris was relentless. Dust filled the air as the cave transformed from a training site into a deadly trap. Within seconds, the entrance was blocked, and the narrow tunnels were choked with rubble. The firefighters who had been inside the cave were now trapped beneath tons of rock. 16 of the firefighters were inside when the collapse occurred. The rest, stationed outside, watched in horror as the ground trembled, and the sound of collapsing rock echoed from within. Chaos erupted. The outside team rushed to the entrance, shouting for their trapped colleagues, but it was clear that the situation was far worse than they had feared. The cave was now a death trap, unstable and unpredictable, with more rocks threatening to fall at any moment. The air inside the cave grew heavy and thick. The narrow passages once filled with anticipation were now filled with dust and darkness. The trapped firefighters struggled to breathe, their flashlights flickering against the thick, oppressive air. The cave, once their training ground, had turned into a tomb. The ground was uneven and slick with mud, and every sound seemed amplified in the oppressive silence that followed the collapse. Outside, the rescuers immediately began mobilizing. Fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue teams were dispatched to the scene. The situation was urgent, but the heavy rain, which had been falling steadily throughout the night, made things even more difficult. The ground was soft, and the threat of additional collapses was ever present. Every minute, every second mattered. The first rescue teams arrived quickly but faced immediate challenges. They couldn't simply rush into the cave. The entire structure was unstable, and more rocks could fall at any moment. As the rain poured down, the team began carefully assessing the cave's entrances. The pressure of the situation mounted. With the ceiling above them already compromised, the ground under their feet was rapidly becoming as dangerous as the cave itself. Inside, the firefighters trapped beneath the rubble were fighting not just for survival, but for a chance to escape. They knew that every passing moment brought them closer to exhaustion, and the air, already thinning, was becoming more difficult to breathe. The cave, silent and unyielding, pressed in on them from all sides. As the hours passed, the rain continued to fall heavily, making the ground outside even more treacherous. The rescuers knew that time was running out. Every minute that passed meant less oxygen for the trapped firefighters and a higher risk of another collapse. The team worked tirelessly, carefully moving rocks and debris, calling out to the trapped men like hoping for a response. One by one, the rescue teams pulled out survivors. The operation was slow, agonizingly so. Each time a firefighter was pulled from the wreckage, the entire team exhaled with relief. But for every person rescued, there was the growing knowledge that there were still others trapped inside. And the cave's ever-present instability made every move fraught with danger. It wasn't until later in the day that the final rescues were made, but by then, the toll of the cave's collapse was clear. 9 firefighters had not survived. Despite the heroic efforts of the rescuers, despite the tireless work of everyone involved, the cave had claimed its victims. The final bodies were recovered, but the loss was devastating. The tragedy was not just a personal loss for the firefighters' families and friends, but for the entire nation. In the days that followed, Brazil mourned the deaths of the brave men who had been taken by the very cave they had trained to conquer. The tragedy of Duas Bocas Cave became a symbol of the harsh reality faced by those who risk their lives to protect others. The cave, which had once been a place of training, had turned into a reminder of the unforgiving power of nature and the bravery of those who dared to enter it. In Brazil, it was the ground above that gave way. But in Mexico, danger came from all around, and underwater. Deep beneath the jungles of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula lies a hidden world, far beyond the reach of sunlight. The Sac Actun Cave system, one of the most intricate and dangerous in the world, stretches its underground arms for over 370 kilometers. But the true story of Sac Actun doesn't end there. It is part of a greater secretive network of caves, some submerged in water, others dry and concealed from the world above. In 2019, explorers confirmed Sac Actun as the third longest underwater cave system known to humankind, measuring an impressive 371.958 kilometers. This cave system, like many others, is both breathtaking and terrifying. The narrow tunnels are full of jagged rocks and sharp turns. But in 2004, something terrible happened inside this cave. On December 9, 2004, 4 experienced cave divers entered the Sac Actun system near Tulum, Mexico. The team, led by Kent Hirsch, a 53-year-old dentist from Pennsylvania, included Michael Nast, a 37-year-old antitrust lawyer, William Downey, a 53-year-old diver from Pennsylvania, and Gene Downey, also from Pennsylvania. All of them were seasoned cave divers, well aware of the risks and dangers that came with exploring such a dangerous environment. Their mission was simple: to explore a lesser-known section of the cave and map new passageways that had yet to be fully explored. The team set off in the early hours of the morning, entering one of the known areas of the system. At first, everything seemed normal. They moved slowly, carefully navigating the narrow, winding passages of the cave. Their equipment was in top shape, and the cold water didn't seem to bother them. The cave was quiet, save for the sound of their breathing and the soft, steady splash of water as they swam deeper into the system. Their underwater radios transmitted faint crackles of static, but nothing unusual. As they ventured deeper, the passages began to twist and turn, the space around them growing narrower and narrower. Eventually, the team reached a fork in the system. Two divers, Kent Hirsch and Michael Nast, chose the left passage while William Downey and Gene Downey decided to take the right. At first, everything went according to plan. The pair on the left moved without incident, continuing through the cave without complications. But for the pair on the right, the situation took a dangerous turn. The passage they chose began to narrow significantly. The walls closed in on them, and the water became murkier, clouded by silt that disturbed the once clear water. The beams from their flashlights cut through the darkness, but they could barely see more than a few feet ahead. As the tunnel constricted, the divers found themselves swimming slowly, their movements restricted by the tight walls. They checked their air gauges, realizing they were running low on air, but the exit was nowhere in sight. The further they ventured, the more the passage seemed to stretch on endlessly. Time began to slip away. The growing realization that they might not be able to make it back set in. Back on the other side, William Downey and Gene Downey had made it to a large open chamber and were waiting for their teammates to catch up. The minutes passed, but there was no sign of them. The communication line went silent. The radio crackled, but no response came. A sense of unease grew. They knew the dangers of Sac Actun. The cave system was known for its labyrinthine passages and its ability to disorient even the most experienced divers. Soon, the first team began retracing their steps, searching for any sign of their missing teammates. They followed their path back through the twisting tunnels, their lights slicing through the murk. The further they went, the more desperate they became. The clock was ticking. Kent Hirsch and Michael Nast were still trapped somewhere in the cave. But where? As time wore on, the situation grew more critical. The divers on the left had exhausted their air supply and had no choice but to stop. They hovered in the dark, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the cave. Their lights flickered as their oxygen tanks drained, and the reality began to settle in. There was no way out. The narrow passageway, once a gateway to discovery, had become their tomb. The rescue operation was quickly set into motion. The surface crew, aware of the dangers that lurked in the cave, organized a search effort. The situation was urgent. The cave system's narrow, twisting passages made navigation difficult, and the silty water reduced visibility to near zero. The rescuers were in for a daunting task. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the rescuers found Kent Hirsch and Michael Nast. The two men were just 250 feet away from an exit. Despite their proximity to safety, the cave had trapped them, just out of reach. Both divers were found drowned, their lifeless bodies floating in the same dark, silent water that had once welcomed them into its depths. They had been so close to freedom, yet so far. Recovery was slow. Divers had to move carefully, not just because of the victims, but because the area was unstable and disorienting. One wrong move could stir up silt and plunge the area into blindness again. The remains were brought to the surface with caution and respect after long hours navigating through the tight passages. Local authorities were notified. News of the incident quickly spread, especially in the diving community. Tributes poured in, honoring the professionalism and courage of the victims. Sac Actun gained a new reputation, not just as a stunning cave system, but as one of the most unforgiving. The cave remained still, silent and unchanging. No sudden rockfalls, no crashing currents, only the quiet press of the cave, slowly squeezing the life out of its victims. It had done nothing but remain in its cold, unmoving stillness, a dangerous and unyielding force. The world of cave diving is one of great beauty and great peril. The Sac Actun tragedy serves as a chilling reminder of how easy it is to be swallowed by the dark, how quickly things can go wrong, and how important it is to respect the silent power of these underground systems. In the end, Kent Hirsch and Michael Nast lost their lives, but their story lives on, serving as a sobering testament to the risks that come with exploring the unknown. Sac Actun, with all its twists and turns, swallowed them whole, but the silence of the cave will never forget the sound of their final breaths. The cave had done nothing but remain still, as it always had. Its silence was its deadliest weapon. There were no rushing currents or massive rockfalls. Only the silent, unyielding press of the cave, slowly squeezing the life out of its victims, from the silent darkness of Germany's water caves, to the sudden collapse in Brazil, to the long, twisting tunnels of Sac Actun. These stories remind us that caves don't forgive mistakes. They don't offer second chances. When the earth closes in around you, it doesn't matter how strong you are, how experienced you are, or how careful you were. In the world of caves, nature always has the final word. If these stories left you breathless, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more true caving nightmares and survival battles. Which story haunted you the most? Would you ever step into a cave after hearing this? Let us know in the comments. We're listening.